Four young Muslim men believed to have conducted the suicide bomb attacks in London on July the 7th were British, a homegrown cell. Who recruited them? Who convinced them of the righteousness of murdering innocent civilians? The British government is planning new measures against what they call preachers of hate. But defining the boundaries between free speech and incitement poses a massive challenge for the police and for Muslim communities. HardTalk has interviewed a number of Muslim figures. My guest today was, till last year, the leader of the radical Islamist group Al-Muhajirun in the UK. Anjem Choudary, welcome to HardTalk.
You're welcome.
Let's go back to July the 7th. What was your first reaction when you heard of the bomb attacks in London?
Our first reaction as Muslims was, why did this take place in London? And what have we done to make ourselves in a position where people are wanting to throw bombs or to detonate bombs in the heart of the city of Great Britain?
Did you assume from the beginning it had been done by Muslims?
Well, we can't make assumptions of who carried out bombings in London. Obviously, the IRA were active until very recently. There are other people who have grudges, who have axes to grind, I'm sure, against the British government. But at the end of the day, there was every likelihood that Muslims would retaliate against the atrocities that the British government was committing in Iraq, in Afghanistan, and the support of the State of Israel was always going to have some kind of repercussions.
Far from being surprised, you expected it.
Well, we expected, we said that there was always a possibility of there being a retaliation from Muslims against Britain if Britain did not withdraw their forces from Iraq and if they did not stop meddling, stop meddling in the affairs of Muslims.
See, when you look at what was said by, for example, Sheikh Omar Bakri, the leader of Muhajirun, he said, going back to 2004, in a Portuguese magazine, and I quote, "There are freelancers ready to launch Al-Qaeda-style attacks. I know they are on the verge of launching a big operation in London." It sounds like he knew something.
No, there's a difference between judging the political situation properly and obviously those people who are living in a cocoon. I mean, you don't need to be blind to appreciate that if you're going to have a foreign policy where you're occupying a country, let's face it, Baghdad, it doesn't lie between London and Birmingham. It's in another country. If you're going to send forces over there, if you're going to occupy someone's land, if you're going to support a state which is stealing the land of Muslims, which is the state of Israel in Palestine, if you're going to be carpet bombing a country like Afghanistan...
I've allowed you to lay out a case which links, in your view, the bombings with Iraq. But let me just ask you this question. Before we get into all of that, will you unreservedly condemn what happened in London?
No, we're not in the business of condoning and condemning. I mean, this question has been posed many times to Muslims over the last few weeks, and it seems ironic that when over 100,000, up to 1 million Muslims died in Iraq because of the sanctions.
Yeah, but we're not talking about Iraq at this moment. We are talking about bomb attacks in London which killed over 50 civilians, including Muslim civilians, civilians from all over the world. Murder, plain and simple. Will you condemn it?
What I will say is that you need to have a look at the whole picture. If you're going to be running around asking for condemnations, if you're going to be pointing the finger of responsibility towards Muslims, if you're going to be introducing new laws and you're going to then turn a blind eye to your own policies overseas, and you're not going to take any responsibility, and far more Muslims have died because of the British foreign policy in Muslim countries. You need to start condemning your own foreign policy. You can't say to Muslims,
I think we've established you will not condemn it. I just wonder why you won't condemn it when your own leader, Omar Bakri, said quite simply, "I condemn the killing of innocent people on the 20th of July." Why won't you say what he said?
No, at the end of the day, innocent people, when we say innocent people, we mean Muslims. As far as non-Muslims are concerned, they have not accepted Islam. As far as we're concerned, that is a crime against God.
I want to be clear about what you're saying. This is very important. You're saying that only Muslims can count as innocent people.
As far as Muslims are concerned, you're innocent if you are a Muslim, then you're innocent in the eyes of God. If you are a non-Muslim, then you're guilty of not believing in God. Yes, there were many victims.
You're guilty. Are you seriously suggesting that everybody on those tube trains and on that bus in London on July the 7th was in some way a legitimate target?
You don't allow me to answer the question fully, Stephen. You're never going to get to the bottom of it. Let me begin by saying, as a Muslim, you must have allegiance where the Sharia says that you have allegiance. You must hate and love for the sake of Allah. You must praise and dispraise for what the Sharia says, you praise and dispraise. So as a Muslim, I must support my Muslim brothers and sisters, wherever they are in the world. I must have allegiance with them. I must cooperate with them. I must love them. And similarly, on the other hand, I must have hatred towards everything which is non-Islam.
You know what, I'm trying not to interrupt you too much, but I still don't feel you have addressed my question. Were the people on the underground trains and on the bus legitimate targets because they were not Muslim?
I'm coming on to your point.
Some of them actually were.
No, you've asked about 2 or 3 different questions. You've asked about innocence. You've asked about whether they were legitimate target. You've asked about whether I'm condoning or condemning. You've asked about whether I praise them.
We've moved on from that.
No,
I've asked you a very simple question.
All of those questions deserve to be answered, and obviously we have the time to explore them. So if I just continue with this particular point, as far as Muslims are concerned, their allegiance is always with the Muslims. So I will never condemn a Muslim for what he does. Indeed, I must stand with him, whether he's an oppressor or oppressed. Now, as far as those people who did the operation on 7/7 are concerned, if their actions were in line with the Sharia, and only God can judge that, then they will get the reward for that. Well, if they weren't in line with the Sharia, then obviously they will get the result of that on the Day of Judgment. As far as I'm concerned, I can only see whether it's a legitimate one according to the Sharia or illegitimate according to the Sharia.
When you take that position, you must accept that you are isolated from the world of Muslim thinking and scholarship. If one looks at the statements made by 40 Muslim clerics, leading clerics and scholars in the United Kingdom, if one looks at the statements made by, for example, one of the leading clerics in Pakistan, and I can quote them all to you, they all say that what happened in London was absolutely against Islam.
You can get 100, even 1,000 government scholars, people who are doing the bidding of their own governments, people who are quite willing to sit with Tony Blair and to push his own domestic and foreign policies. As far as Islam is concerned, let me set out the Islamic position, because you want to know what Islam says. As far as Islam is concerned, on the issue of suicide, for someone to take his own life because of depression or because he's ill or because he cannot continue his life, this is something which is condemned in Islam. However, for someone who is fighting against people who are occupying their land, for someone whose house has been bombed, for example, in Afghanistan or in Iraq, they have a legitimate right to respond. Allah says in the Quran, fight those in the way of Allah who fight against you. He said, do aggression against those people.
You know as well as I do, we're talking about civilians sitting on a train in London.
However, I'm coming on to that point. However, as far as Great Britain is concerned, Al-Muhajirin have been on record for the last 8 years, during which we've been in existence, saying that the British, the Muslims who are living in Britain are living in Britain under a covenant of security. In other words, as long as the lives and the wealth of the Muslims are not targeted, then the Muslims are not allowed to target the life and the wealth of the people who they're living with. However, what the British government did over the last year, particularly since they entered into Iraq, is that they breached that covenant of security.
I simply want to ask you whether you feel that you have any credibility in your own community, given the statements, and I'll read some of them, from UK Muslim scholars, joint declaration on the 15th of July, quote, "We regard these acts as totally reprehensible, absolutely un-Islamic. These killings had no sanction in Islam." It could not be clearer. Mufti Rafi Usmani, one of Pakistan's leading clerics, said on July the 23rd, Islam does not allow killing of innocent civilians and non-combatants under any circumstances. And to go back even further, the Grand Sheikh Mohammed Sayyid Tantawi of Al-Azhar, which, as you know, is the highest seat of Sunni Muslim learning in Egypt.
He's a government scholar.
He said extremism is the enemy of Islam. He said suicide bomb attacks on civilians had nothing to do with the Islamic concept.
Yeah, but I don't follow people.
You don't follow any of these people?
No, none of them. Of course, they're government scholars. They're people who have sold out the Muslims worldwide. There are people who are doing their government's bidding. Talk to people like Abu Muhammad al-Maqdisi. Talk to people like Sheikh Muhammad. Talk to people like Sheikh Abu Qatada. Talk to people like Nasr al-Fahd. There are many ulama around the world, people who do not compromise their belief, people who only stick to the Quran and the Sunnah, the traditions of the Messenger Muhammad, according to the understanding of the Sahaba.
Do you regard Osama bin Laden as a scholar?
Do you
regard Osama bin Laden as a legitimate scholar?
He's a fighter and he's the emir of the jihad worldwide, and he's a learned man.
You believe he has some sort of Muslim credibility, do you?
Of course he does. If you talk to the Muslims around the world, I can guarantee you, if you had an election in any country, any Muslim country in the world today, that Sheikh Osama bin Laden would be more popular than the leader that you have at the current time.
Let's talk about your position and how it relates to the British Muslim community. polls have shown since July 7th, 9 out of 10 British Muslims believe violence has no place, absolutely no place in any political
point. I'm not going to make it very long, but the point is that as a Muslim, your reference is not the majority or the minority. Your reference is not those so-called muftis or government scholars you've been quoting. Your reference is the Quran and the traditions of the Messenger Muhammad according to the understanding of the Sahaba. That is the divine standard. And if you ask me about that, I will tell you that in the Quran, in chapter 9 of the Quran, verse 111, Allah says that Allah has bought from the believers their lives and their wealth, and in return He's given them paradise. You will fight, you will kill and be killed.
You were born in this country. You are British. Did it not cause you any personal pain when those bombs went off, when those people were killed?
Stephen, first of all, if you're born somewhere, that doesn't make you have any kind of allegiance. If you're born on a vine, it doesn't make you a horse. I was born in Britain. I believe the whole of the world belongs to God. I believe that the law of Allah must be prevalent on the earth. So yes, I'm in Great Britain.
You have no allegiance.
No, I have no allegiance to Great Britain whatsoever. I have no allegiance to the Queen. I have no allegiance to the Prime Minister. As a Muslim, when you say La ilaha illallah, you say that I obey, I serve, I submit, I follow no one except for Allah.
Do you hate Britain?
No, I don't hate Britain.
Which has raised you, which educated you?
No, it's not right that the country raised me. The fact is, I was raised by my parents, and I learnt my Islam from scholars qualified in Islamic law.
When did you adopt the positions you have now? I mean, you went to school here, you went to university in this country. When did you decide that you had absolutely no allegiance to Britain, that you would pursue a course which in many ways is absolutely antipathetic to Britain and its interests?
Not to Britain. You see, you need to make a distinction between the country, the trees and the livestock here. We have nothing against the country as far as Britain is concerned. But yes, as far as the authority...
The trees and the livestock, you certainly have something against the people.
No, wait a second. But as far as the authority is concerned, as far as the people who support the authority, yes, certainly we have something against them. As Muslims, we must do, because they are the people who are supporting the genocide in Muslim countries. As far as my own Islam is concerned, yes, I mean, I met Sheikh Muhammad. I studied at the Sharia, at the London School of Sharia. I learned a lot of the things that I believe today from him. And he not because he himself has his own personal opinions, but because everything he says is based upon the Quran and the traditions of the Messenger Muhammad.
I want you to get away from rehearsed answers. I want you to address me as a human being, as somebody who lives in London, who was born in London. I just want to get down to the personal feelings you have. Did you not have any pain in your heart when it happened on July 7th?
When what happened? When the Muslims in Palestine were killed?
No, when the bombs went off in the underground trains and on the bus.
A lot of things happened on July the 7th. Why is it you're only focusing on Great Britain? Why is it that when it comes to the British blood, that it's real blood, and when it comes to the Muslim blood, it can run like water?
Do you think there are many Muslims in this country who feel like you?
How many minutes silence did you have for the 1 million Muslims who were killed because of your sanctions in Iraq? How many minutes silence did you have on Chechnya? If you care so much about people, then the answer to that would be that you did care, that you condemned your government's policy in Chechnya.
You may choose not to answer my questions, but I will keep asking them.
I'm asking you.
I'm asking the questions. I will ask the same questions until you answer them. How many Muslims in the United Kingdom do you believe feel like you?
I believe that there are many Muslims who refer only to the Quran and the Sunnah and who have allegiance only with the Muslims. The fact is, because of your draconian laws that you have in this country, because of the arbitrary arrest and detention of many people, including some of the scholars, because of the raiding of the mosque, people are not going to speak up.
Let me ask you something. It's a hypothetical question, but let me ask you something.
But the thing is, it's irrelevant. You know why? Because even if there was just one person, even if it was just me, the fact is that your allegiance and your emotions must be in line with the Sharia, not in accordance with public opinion.
If you had met the 4 men who planted those bombs on the train and the bus on the eve of their actions, what would you have said to them?
But this is irrelevant, isn't it? Because
I'm asking you. Of course, it's hypothetical, but I'm trying to get into your mindset.
Yeah.
Would you try to stop them?
Well, I'll answer that with a question. If those people who were on the trains were alive today, do you think they'd ask the British government to withdraw their troops from Iraq? To stop occupying somebody else's land?
That
to stop supporting the fire state?
With the issue I'm trying to wrestle with.
Because that is the cause. The fact is, it's irrelevant. Whatever I said to those people, they probably would have done it anyway. So it doesn't matter, does it? The fact is, unless you deal with the cause, then you're going to have the same effect. It's only today that Ayman...
Do you feel no duty whatsoever to report what you hear about people who may have the desire to use violence in this country? You have no interest in reporting that to the British police, the authorities?
We're not going to have any kind of allegiance to the government or to the police. The fact is that we've been on record. Sheikh Muhammad himself has said that he's willing to enter into a dialogue and debate with those so-called moderate and secular Muslims in order to find a solution. The youth have been controlled in this country for a decade. 2 generations were controlled by someone like Sheikh Bakri Muhammad when he could function, when he was propagating Islam. But when the government started to clamp down on the so-called clerics and the so-called extremists, when they said that we're going to ban your venues, when they started arresting people, then those youth became loose. So they started to refer to other people. They started going abroad. You find now that there's a link between what's happening in the city of London.
Your own parents feel the same way you do?
Of course my parents feel the same. My father passed away, but my mother agrees with me 100%.
Let's talk a little bit about Muhajirun, the organization that you led in the UK. It's dissolved, isn't it?
It's dissolved, absolutely.
But what was its role?
Its role was to call the Muslims and the non-Muslims to embrace Islam as a way of life, to ask them to embrace the Sharia as a divine law and order.
You raised money. Where did that money go? What was it for?
Al-Muhajirin was never a jihadi organization. That's why it dissolved. When the British government breached the covenant of security under which Muslims were living in this country for decades, when they decided to murder Muslims overseas, when they decided that Muslims can't practice their religion here anymore, why is it that when Muslims called for the Sharia, suddenly Tony Blair is saying that our values are better than yours, that we need to stop these people calling for the Caliphate?
Why is it that no Muslim organization except your own seems to feel the way you do? The Muslim Council of Britain has not told me, and I spoke to them the other day. They never told me they couldn't practice Islam in this country.
The Muslim Council of Britain, although they're chumcha and they're lackeys of the British government, don't make the British policy. Tony Blair was on record as saying a week ago, he said that what these people really want is a Taliban-type state. In other words, what he's saying is that he doesn't want the Muslims to implement the Sharia on a state level.
I want to get back to
that is something that every Muslim wishes.
I want to get back to Al-Muhajirun and why it dissolved. I think the truth of its dissolution is simply that the leadership knew that the British government was going to move against your organization because you were inciting. Let me quote to you something said by Omar Bakri in the 18th of January 2005. He said, "The market of jihad is opened. Now all we need is people who are the merchandise, the ones who want to buy paradise. If you can't do it physically, do it verbally, do it financially, but do it." And that was your leader in January of this year.
The Sheikh talked about many different issues, but the fact is that he never said to people when they were living on a covenant of security to do any actions over here. People, all kinds of people used to...
He abandoned the covenant of security, and you know it.
No, he didn't.
The covenant of security no longer applies.
Wait a second. No, the fact is that you need to make a distinction. Look, if I say to you that there are certain conditions...
You came onto this program 2 years ago. You talked about the covenant of security.
Stephen, let me...
Earlier this year, the covenant of security was declared to be dead.
The problem is, unless you hear it from our mouths, and we're the only people at present in Britain who are willing to tell you the truth and tell you the way it is, that you're never really going to understand. And I think the British public and even the people abroad have a right to know how it stands. The fact is that if a scholar or an Islamic activist tells you that these are the conditions which need to be fulfilled in order, for example, to cut the hand of the thief, if someone goes and steals something and his hand is cut, it's not the fault of the scholar.
We've been down this road before. I now want to ask you...
Stephen, if he explains that this is the covenant of security, and if it's breached and the Muslims don't have a covenant of security, and the government breaches it, then they only have themselves to blame if there are repercussions.
So it has been breached. And
it was breached by the government, not because Sheikh Bakri Muhammad said it's been breached. He doesn't have the right to make Islamic law up. This is the revelation. Nobody can change revelation, but you can change your own policy based upon your own whims and desires.
Sheikh Bakri declared Britain to be Dar al-Harb, which basically means a land of war, a land where...
Britain's always been Dar al-Harb. Britain's always been Dar al-Harb. Dar al-Harb is a place where there is non-Islamic law. The whole world today is Dar al-Harb. Dar al-Harb
the point about being a land which is Dar al-Harb is that you and your group therefore feel you have license to conduct violent operations within it.
Fact is that the whole world is Dar al-Harb. There are certain areas where the Muslims are actively liberating their land.
So why on the 18th of January did Omar Bakri declare Britain to be Dar al-Harb? If it's always been the case, why did he choose to say it?
Yeah, because you never bothered to listen to him before. But the fact is that Britain changed from being Dar al-Harb to being Dar al-Fitna. Dar al-Fitna is a place where the Muslims no longer have sanctity for their life and their wealth. That was the change. Otherwise, Britain has always been Dar al-Harb.
What has happened to the people who were in your organization, Al-Muhajirun? What's happened to them in the last few months?
Well, I mean, they're getting on with their own lives. Some of them are continuing. Some of them joined Al-Ghuraba. Some of them joined the Saviour sect. Some of them are teaching Islam on an individual basis. There are many things happening within the Muslim community. I don't keep track of everyone within Al-Muhajirin. But, you know, there's one thing that I should say, that I think that instead of looking at those so-called clerics like Sheikh Abu Bakr Muhammad as a problem, I think you need to look at them, looking at them as a solution, because we're living in a global world today. You see, if you want to know what is in the hearts and the minds of Muslims in, for example, Al-Qaeda or in Iraq, then you need to start talking to people like Sheikh Abu Bakr Muhammad, who's going to give you it the way that it is.
The British government is putting forward a new raft of anti-terrorist legislation. The plan is for a new offence of indirect incitement to terrorism. And to quote Mr. Clark, he says it targets those who, while not directly inciting, glorify and condone terrorist acts knowing